Welcome to Hockey Nights in Vegas. My name is Eddie Rivkin. I'm joined as always by Joe Payne of the Las Vegas and Advisor. And for tonight's episode, we have a very special guest, Chris Chapman of Fox Sports, the producer of the Vegas Golden Knights Insider Show, and a guy that we kind of like to talk to when we see him at the game. So it's one of those special episodes where you get somebody else's voice besides Joe and I. And we're going to talk a little bit looking back at the Colorado Avalanche series, and then we're going to move on to round 3, game 1 against the Montreal Canadiens tomorrow night at the Fortress. So, Chris, you lead. Tell me your big takeaways from the Avs series.
Well, my big takeaway is Alex Pietrangelo is really good. He was much maligned. I feel like coming into the series, I think a lot of people were saying that he really didn't live up to his contract. And let's be honest, regular season wise, he probably didn't. But I think it was Pete DeBoer who said he was the best player on the ice in that series. And I have to agree. I mean, he was everywhere defensively. He was putting a lot of shots on net. And of course, he scores the big goal in the closeout game at T-Mobile just the other night in game 6 to put them ahead late in the second period. And Golden Knights really never looked back after that.
Joe?
Chris, I do have a question for you, though. Do you think the Avalanche's first round series against St. Louis hurt them a little bit as far as maybe a little bit of overconfidence that they were just going to pretty much run through the Honda West division and get to the semifinals?
I don't know if that's the way I would put it, because I think St. Louis, it was funny when we did the discussion on the VGK Insider Show previous to the playoffs, Darren Millard asked me, he said, who's a team that doesn't have a chance? And I point blank said St. Louis. I didn't feel like they were very good coming into the playoffs. I felt like they had a lot of questions, especially in goal. I'm not a big Craig Binnington fan. I'm sorry, Jordan Binnington, not a big Jordan Binnington fan. I don't know who Craig Binnington is. I'm thinking of someone else, I guess. But yeah, not a big Jordan Binnington fan. But I don't know if overconfidence was the case, because, I mean, these two teams played pretty evenly in the regular season. But maybe because Vegas had kind of gone through. I will say this, maybe after game 1, that could have been the feeling, right? Because Vegas had just played a 7-game series. You absolutely blow them away in that first game. And second game, I think you got a wake-up call in that second period where, hey, Vegas is here to play. And even though you won that game, I still think maybe it was a little bit of a wake-up call for them.
Okay. And do you think everybody was making a big thing about the line matchups that DeBoer pretty much outcoached Colorado? Do you agree with that? As far as, did he get into their heads as far as matching the Stone line up against their big top guys, their big 3 big guys?
Well, it kind of forced Bednar to make some changes in the series. And I think Pete DeBoer absolutely outcoached Jared Bednar in that series. I think it really showed when the fact that Mark Stone just completely shut down Nathan McKinnon when he was out there with him. There were some definitely favorable matchups that they had, and Colorado wasn't able to exploit them, especially when he had that top line out there with the 4th line of Vegas. You would have expected a couple more goals or points out of that, their top 3 guys, but you really didn't get that. And I think a lot of credit goes to Pete DeBoer. And I think a lot of credit also goes to that 4th line when they were out there. They did a really good job.
And do you think Grubauer got exposed as not being as good as he was made out to be? He got nominated for the Vezina and all that, where he's kind of like the redheaded stepchild when you put him up against Vasilevsky and Fleury. So do you think the goaltending played a big part in the Knights beating Colorado? I think Fleury totally outplayed Grubauer at the other end of the ice.
Yeah, I think Grubauer was exposed a little bit. You mentioned the redheaded stepchild, and certainly it's a big jump when you're talking about being in the same category as Fleury and Vasilevsky. Grubauer had a really good season. Let's not downplay that. He had a fantastic season, but I think the turning point for me was that Marchessault goal in game 3, right? Colorado was 5 minutes away from winning that game. And I think Grubauer misplays the puck, maybe comes out a little too far. Marchessault plays it off the boards, bangs it in off his leg, off of Grubauer's leg into the net. And I don't think Grubauer was really the same after that. He was good in game 5, but I don't think he was as good as he was in game 2. And, it's funny, Grubauer, a lot of people may remember a couple of years ago when the Capitals won their Stanley Cup,
He was the
he
backup.
started game 1 and 2 against Columbus, and he lost both of those games. So they went back to Holtby. And of course, the rest is history, as I like to say, especially in Washington, D.C. for Capitals and their fans.
Right.
Well, I think Pete DeBoer was probably the MVP of the series. I think what surprised me most was I don't know if it was Jared Bednar's ego, but even when he had last line change in game 5, he didn't really seem to make any effort whatsoever to get the first line away from Mark Stone's line. And considering how bad they got outplayed in the second and third period of game 2 and how completely dominated they were in game 3 and 4, I thought that would have been the big adjustment. Breaking them up in game 6 certainly was a surprise, but when you have last change and you don't exploit it and your team's getting their ass kicked, it seems a little sort of out of whack that he didn't make that game 5 wasn't more or better managed by him. And Pete DeBoer ate his lunch. There's no other way to put it, in my opinion. And, but Joe and I have talked a lot in the past. We both thought that Colorado was a better matchup for the Golden Knights than Minnesota. And the Minnesota series, I think, really battle tested them and got their armor ready for Colorado, where Colorado just slept through and accepted the anointing of the Stanley Cup from NBCSN and basically everybody else in the hockey world. So, I think that going forward, it's a different role. They can't wear the underdog hat. If it was me, I would go for the full WWF heel turn and go and be the bad guy, because everybody, Montreal's been in the league since 1909 and blah, 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 blah. I think the Golden Knights should go straight heel and be the bad guy and ride for the series. So Joe, you lead. We've covered Colorado. There's no real reason to rehash it much further, with game 1 being tomorrow night. Tell me your preview of the Patchzuki Bowl. That's what I'm going to call it.
I think, and this is probably good news for Vegas Golden Knight fans and probably bad news for Montreal Canadiens. And I'm wondering if Chris agree with me here. Fleury did not steal any games in that Colorado series. And, when Fleury's good, the team is much, much better. If Fleury starts getting back into playing, stealing games, Montreal is in for a lot of trouble, because the team just beat Colorado without Fleury. I don't even think Fleury was a star in any one of the games. And if he plays like we know he can play, Montreal, I think, is in trouble here, because they don't score a whole bunch of goals. They pretty much rely on Carey Price. So if Fleury plays up to what we know he can play, I think Montreal's in serious trouble here in this round 3.
Yeah,
Chris?
It's funny. I agree with a lot of what you said, because I don't really feel like Fleury, he was really good against Minnesota, and he was really good in that game 5 after he let in that kind of goofy goal there at the end. I mean, I think he kind of made it his personal mission. I mean, he really kept them in that game, because that second period, Colorado really, really dominated them. But they only allow the one goal on it seemed like Colorado was constantly applying pressure. But outside of that, I don't really feel like Fleury was good, but he wasn't great. And I feel like Vegas is going to get a highly motivated, or I should say Montreal is going to face a highly motivated Marc-Andre Fleury, because of the fact that it's Montreal. He's a Quebec guy. He grew up idolizing Patrick Roy, Martin Brodeur, another one of his heroes, also Quebec guys. So there's the matchup against Carey Price. It kind of has a lot of salacious headlines, right? Like it's one of those, oh yeah, let's reach for this. Whereas the Fleury against Grubauer, it doesn't really bring the same kind of mustard, I feel like Price and Fleury does. So I feel like he's going to be highly motivated. And if that's the case, and we see Marc-Andre Fleury like we saw against the Wild, that's going to be bad news for the Canadiens.
Yep, I totally agree with you on that one, Chris.
Well, I mean, So let's talk about storylines for the series. You have Fleury, Marchessault, and Carrier returning to Quebec. The biggest headline has to be Thomas Tatar. No, just kidding. Sorry, Thomas, healthy scratch and everything. But anyway, the other pieces in that trade, Pacioretty and Suzuki, they hated to give up Suzuki. I'm sure Montreal asked for Cody Glass first as part of that deal. But you have the Canadiens captain returning to the Bell Center and playing against a rookie who arguably has had a really good regular season, and he's also doing very well in the playoffs. So there's those two things, and I wonder. Let me ask you guys this: the Golden Knights have never traveled outside of 1 hour, time zone wise. The Canadiens have been going across Canada the whole season. Do you think that travel might have any effect on this series at all, with the Golden Knights going back east for the first time? Chris?
I think the longer the series goes, it does, because certainly, you look at least for Vegas, you were home to close out Colorado in that game 6. You've been home now. You'll be going on 5 days before you play another game. You're going to be home for another 2 home games. So you're home for a week before you travel to Montreal. Hopefully, in their case, they're already up 2-0 before they go back. But I feel like the longer the series goes, if you get to a point where you're getting to a game 7, I feel like the travel absolutely will have an effect on the Golden Knights. The Canadiens have been home resting up too. So they're probably here already. I would imagine they probably got in yesterday. But, it's something I don't feel early on will be a factor. But I feel like if it gets to a game 7, that's that travel, that game 6 where you come home for a game and then you go back, that's always one you got to be wary of. And I feel like if it gets to a game 7, it's something you may have to look at.
Joe, what do you think about the travel?
When you talk about travel, Vegas did travel the time zone during the Minnesota series and played a full 7 games and went back and forth. I don't see it to be that much of a problem, only because I think the Vegas Golden Knights are that much better than the Montreal Canadiens, that even if there is a small advantage to the time travel, I think that Vegas is just too fast of a team. It's funny because I was just watching the Tampa Bay Islander game, and a friend of mine back east was watching it, who had watched the Vegas games, and he texted me and said, "Is NBC showing this game in slow motion? Because the players look like they're moving so slow compared to what I watched during the Colorado Vegas Golden Knights series." So I think Vegas' speed is going to be the main problem that Montreal has to contend to. I don't think Suzuki is even a storyline here. He was a high draft pick of the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think you and I have discussed this. I think Montreal probably asked for Cody Glass first, and Vegas probably balked on that because they didn't want to give away their number 1 pick overall, and they settled on Suzuki. But Suzuki's size, I don't think would really work well in a heavy conference like the Western Conference. And I think he can survive in the East, where they play a little bit more of a run and gun game. And, but here, and the same thing with Brancham. I think that's one of the reasons why they shipped Brancham to Quebec to Ottawa, was that because they were not only getting Stone in return, but the point is Brancham was a small guy, and he was going to get eaten alive against heavy teams like the Kings and the Ducks and the Sharks. So the storyline is Pacioretty. He was a captain there for, I think, 3 or 4 years. It's a good storyline. And then you add in Carrier and War and Fleury and, the coming home kind of thing. It's a good storyline.
It's interesting that you mentioned the heavy guys, because if you look at some of the guys that Vegas has brought in, especially via trade, Nick Waugh, big heavy guy, Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, these aren't small players. They've traded away Suzuki, they've traded away Tatar, not exactly big heavy power guys. I mean, Alex Tuch is a guy that obviously has been here for a long time, and in that Colorado series, he used his body in that game 6. I mean, he absolutely lit Nathan MacKinnon up. So I think you're right about Suzuki, I mean, even Glass has had to bulk up. I think he put on like 20 pounds last off season. So,
And
it's yeah. But I tend to agree that I feel like the speed of Vegas, I don't know if this gets to 7 games. So I don't know if what I mentioned even becomes a factor, but yeah, it's certainly something that we could really take notice of, because I'm going to be curious to see how well Suzuki does when he's out there against the big guys for Vegas.
Well, the thing that we preached about previously is you can't teach size. I mean, at the end of the day, and it was surprising because we talked about this a number of episodes ago. The Vegas Golden Knights are the biggest and the heaviest team in the NHL. And, when the ice shrinks for the playoffs, this is the time that they're built for. They have incredible speed, but if the game gets into the sludge, they're built for a real short ice kind of contest against really anybody. Chris, what are the keys to the series against Montreal?
Well, I think a lot of what we saw from Montreal is going to be interesting to me, because Philip Deneau, of course, is a guy who's getting a lot of notoriety. Montreal fans saying, "Hey, you're talking all this about Mark Stone. Well, look at what our guy has done. He's shut down Austin Matthews and he shut down, the Winnipeg Jets top line too." So, it's going to be interesting to me that if Philip Deneau was able to have the same success against Vegas as he's had against against Toronto and Winnipeg. The other factor for me is depth scoring. That's one of the things I always seem to harp on with the Golden Knights is their depth scoring. They got depth scoring in that last series. If you look at the series where they've lost, Dallas last year, San Jose the year before, they really didn't get the scoring from their depth guys. I think guys like Nick Waugh, guys like William Carrier, guys like Keegan Colasar, they're going to have to be noticeable in this series, because I feel like Carey Price, he has the ability to shut teams down, and he has the ability to shut down stars. And the Golden Knights, the series that they lose, sometimes they make mediocre goalies look really good. We saw it with Khudobin last year, right? He's not a great goalie by any stretch. He's a good goalie, but they made him look like a Vezina candidate. So if Vegas is able to do what they did against Colorado, I don't see them having any issue with Montreal.
And,
Joe, keys to the series.
Well, Chris, just to go back to your point, when you talked about the size of Vegas, I think that's a reoccurring problem with Vegas. They have such a big team, but they make, like you said, they make mediocre goaltenders look good, because you know why, Chris? They take a multitude of shots from the perimeter as opposed to getting in front of the net. They're big enough bodies. A guy like Tuck, a guy like Reeves, even a guy like Stone, getting in front of the net and taking away the eyes of the goaltender. For a lot of games, Vegas plays on the perimeter, and they take shots. And in this league, most of the time, if a goaltender sees a shot, he's stopping it. And sort of, I think if Vegas gets in front of Carey Price's eyes and creates havoc in the blue paint and gets some greasy goals, this series is going to be over quick. This might not even. It may go 5 games. It may. But if Vegas takes shots from the perimeter, they're not going to beat Carey Price in that situation. It's going to make for a long series if they don't get in front of the net.
And it's irrelevant now, but I think it does bear some mentioning. Vegas they've only won 1 game against Montreal in their history, and that was year 1. They're 1-5 all time, and they've never won in Montreal. I mean, obviously that doesn't matter because it's a completely different set of circumstances now, but Carey Price has played really well against this team. He didn't start the first game at T-Mobile. That was Antti Niemi, and they chased him in the first period. But Carey Price came in and played pretty good in that game. So I think it does bear some mentioning that they have not beaten Carey Price ever.
You know what? I understand why you make the point that way. My counterpoint to that is they've only played against a Pete DeBoer coached Vegas Golden Knights team once.
Yeah.
And that was, I think it was like January 20th, 4 or 5 days after Pete DeBoer got here, before even the first 8-day break when it was in that Ottawa, right in that very front end sort of block before they got their first break where Pete could really put the systems in. So
yeah, I think it went Buffalo, Ottawa, Montreal, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
I think
something
that was
like
the
that.
game that it was the game that Vegas won in overtime. Is that correct?
I believe so. And I think it was 2-1 or 3-2 or something like that. But
So
it's a different Golden Knights team. Certainly now, with Pete DeBoer being a year and a half into his tenure here. And listen, to me, it's very simple. If the Golden Knights come out and play with the intensity that they played against Colorado, the Canadiens are dead, because that is truly the big boy team playing big boy hockey at probably the highest possible level. I mean, you could easily make an argument that the West Division's 2 playoff rounds for the Golden Knights were easily the toughest of anybody else's. So if they bring that same intensity and they decide that they're not going to be the fancy pants, make the extra pass, try to get too pretty to get the perfect Sports Center goal, Golden Knights, and they just get to pounding, they should be able to pound out Montreal pretty good, I think.
hey, Chris, I do have a question for you. Vegas is the number 2 seed and Montreal was the number 16 seed coming in. Is Montreal looking at this as like they're on a free roll, like they're not even supposed to be here? And does that kind of help them in their approach to the series?
Well, I think they're playing with nothing to lose, right? I mean, they were down 3-1 against Toronto, and for all intents and purposes, that series was over, and they proved everyone wrong. I feel like at this point, the house money thing does kind of go away, because there's so much more at stake now, right? Like, maybe you could take that attitude into the Winnipeg series. Like, hey, you know what? Nobody's giving us a chance. We got nothing to lose. Let's go out there and beat these guys. Now there's a lot of pressure, right? Because in Montreal, you haven't made a Stanley Cup final since 1993? This is the most storied franchise in
maybe
pro sports, right? Like they're every bit as successful as the New York Yankees. They've got a multitude. They've got more Stanley Cups than some Vegas fans have even been a lot. What is it, 25, 26 Stanley Cups? So, I mean, they've got the history, but the pressure, I feel, is something that, look, it's been, what was it, 10 years ago? They lost to the Rangers. I think Pete DeBoer coached the Rangers, and I think they not the Rangers.
No, the Devils.
No, but they did lose to the Rangers, I think, and then the Rangers lost to the Kings in the Stanley Cup final. I think the Rangers beat Montreal in that series. I could be wrong. In the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yes, but they beat them, and then they lost to LA, and when Alex Martinez scored the double.
Yeah. So it's been a long time for Montreal to even be at this stage. And like I said, it's 1993 since you were in the final. So they're carrying the weight of not just Montreal, but they're carrying the weight of Canada as well, because they're the last Canadian team to win the cup. So the first time since Vancouver in 2011 that could advance to the Stanley Cup final. So there's a ton of pressure. I think that house money kind of goes away a little bit, because now there's pressure on you, right? If you lose to Winnipeg, you say, okay, well, we had a good season, right? We won a series, we beat Toronto. I don't really feel like the animosity was there with Winnipeg. It maybe developed in that first game.
It was after the hit.
But the thing is, I said this the other day to somebody. I said, let's look at Montreal. They have to look at the fact that this is it. They go back to a division next year when things get back to normal, and we align back to what the divisions were previous to this year. They may not even be a playoff team next year, right? They were barely a playoff team this year. The only reason they even got in was because of the North Division just being so bad. Mm-hmm. I think there's some school of thought that maybe if Vancouver doesn't go through the issues that they went through, maybe Vancouver catches them and passes them. Right. So they don't really have a window. This is it for them. It's like, this is make or break, because the odds of getting back to this stage next year, they're probably not there. So I think that Montreal is going to be playing with a little bit of pressure in this series.
Okay, fair enough.
And you have the interim coach label still on Ducharme. So he's obviously playing for a contract and a job, much as Craig Berube was 2 years ago, and Dallas Stars as well, right? Their coach last year was interim. So, I mean, maybe there's a little magic there, right? Interim coaches going to the Stanley Cup final, but maybe not.
So, Chris, let me ask you this question. Does this series come down to goaltending, or does it come down to the fact that Vegas is going to be able to roll 4 lines consistently against Montreal? So is the decision in your mind, is it going to be the goaltending who's going to win this series, or is the fact that Vegas has the depth and can roll 4 lines constantly where Montreal doesn't have that?
I think the way I look at it is Vegas can win if Marc-Andre Fleury isn't outstanding. If he's good, they can win.
Right.
For Montreal to win the series, Carey Price needs to be amazing. He needs to be Vezina caliber Carey Price in order for them to win this series. I don't think they could win the series if he's not at his best. So I guess in some regards, it will come down to goaltending. But I think if Vegas is able to do their thing where they roll 4 lines, I don't think Carey Price playing good is really even going to be a factor. Or Marc-Andre Fleury having to be at his best, I don't foresee that being an issue.
Well, I think that the only way that Montreal has a prayer in this series is if Carey Price stands on his head.
Yeah.
Every other factor, mitigates itself. They have a great first line. If Montreal's first line plays out of their minds and neutralizes the Golden Knights stone line, the Golden Knights are significantly deeper, and the other 3 lines, I think, will easily carry the day. There is nothing that Montreal can throw at the Golden Knights that the Golden Knights can't absorb. Whereas the Golden Knights can beat Montreal in a fast game, they can certainly will beat them in a size and a heavy game. And Fleury, I don't want to say Fleury's not going to be a factor in the goaltending matchup, but the series is going to depend wholly and entirely on Carey Price's performance. Because if he's not superhuman, Montreal has no chance.
Yeah.
If he's excellent, at least there will be some entertaining hockey to watch, right? And if he's average, it's going to be a snoozer, in my opinion. As far as the Golden Knights go, just keep doing what you're doing. I don't think that I can't see a scenario where Pete DeBoer is going to be forced to react, to make changes or anything like that. They're overwhelmingly a better team. Yes, the Canadiens have gotten further than anybody expected, sure, right? And, they have nothing to lose, except they have everything to lose. They have an entire country. They have their history. They have all those things that you had mentioned before. But, I mean, if you're the Golden Knights, I think the plan is just the plan. And we saw it for 7 games against Minnesota. We saw it for 6 games against Colorado. Just keep it doing what you're doing, right? Chip, if they want to bottle up the neutral zone, chip, chase, and smash them on the forecheck all day and all night, all 4 lines, relentlessly forecheck them to death. If they do that, I don't see a way. Whereas conversely, again, the only way that Montreal has a prayer in this is if, Carey Price is a Marvel superhero, in my opinion.
Chris, do you see these games, this series being games of 2-1, 3-2, real low scoring games, or do you think?
I think that's going to depend on Carey Price, because I don't know if they can keep Vegas off the board. Obviously, he needs to be really good, like we just said. But I think if he's really good, then the Golden Knights are going to have to grind out wins. If he's not good, then Vegas is going to put up a lot of goals in this series, because I just don't think Montreal has the depth. I don't really feel like their blue line is strong enough. Remember, they made a couple trades at the deadline. Right. They brought in, of course, former Golden Knight John Merrill from Detroit at the deadline to solidify that blue line. And I guess for a lot of people, they're like, wow, John Merrill sometimes was a healthy scratch in Vegas, and now Montreal is kind of reliant on him to be a key cog in what their blue line does. So I feel like if Carey Price is really good, then it's going to be low scoring, because I expect a really good Marc-Andre Fleury in this series for a lot of the reasons I kind of laid out earlier. He's going to be highly motivated for a variety of reasons. Obviously, being one step away from having another opportunity to win the Stanley Cup being the biggest. I think this team has learned from past mistakes. I feel like maybe they learned a lot, even just this season from the Minnesota series. So I think they're going to give everything they can to try to put as many pucks in the back of the net. And I think some of those down the lineup guys are going to contribute quite a bit in this series, because I feel like there's a lot of exploitable matchups there for the Golden Knights' third and fourth lines. William Carrier is a guy I think could have a big role in this series. And one of the other things we're not talking about is if the Golden Knights get Tomas Nosek back at any point in this series, that's a pretty big jolt that fourth line will get, because now all of a sudden you have so many different parts that you could piece in to really, if you're Pete DeBoer, to help make your team the best it could possibly be. Now, I don't know the status of Nosek. Maybe we don't see him at all, but you have to feel like he's been out a while. They've been telling us day to day, game time decision, all that stuff for a couple of weeks. So if he is anywhere close to coming back, what a boost that's going to be for the Golden Knights.
And actually, that you say that, Eddie and I had this discussion that if Nosek is healthy, does he even crack the lineup to get back in? Because the Knights were playing so well, the third and fourth. He wouldn't go back on the third line, obviously, because that line is pretty much set. But
yeah,
who if Nosek comes in, who goes out? Does Kolosov come out?
That's the thing. I think if you're Pete DeBoer, you have it's like what were the toys when we were kids? The logs, the Lincoln logs. You can interchange them in a variety of different ways. I mean, just look at what he did in this series, right? The Colorado series. They win 2 games in a row. They go back to Colorado. Who comes out of the lineup but Ryan Reeves?
Right.
After being suspended for 2 games, he comes back in that game 4. They win 5-1, and then you pull him out of the lineup. So there's so many different things that Pete DeBoer could do. And just getting Nosek back would be such a boost, because it gives him one more Lincoln log that he could put into the set there.
And even on the back end, he's got the option between Holden and Haig too.
Yeah, I mean, look, Nick Haig has played a really good playoffs. He's had a really good, postseason. Nick Holden, how do you take him out of the lineup? He's got 7 points.
I know. I was surprised when he was scratched that one game. I'm
yeah,
like,
me too.
Yeah. But then he came back and he came right back. So
yeah.
Don't you wish one time Pete DeBoer would just tell us some of the thought process? I mean, we know it's never going to happen. We know that we get the form answer every single time. We only saw Salty Pete one time this year, but I mean, but he does. I mean, you talk about a guy who's got all, he's almost got all the bullets in his gun, and now Peyton Krebs is even skating on his own, which means he could be, a week to 10 days away. And, even though he only had sort of a 4-game cup of coffee before he broke his jaw, we saw a lot of upside in that young man. Yeah. And I mean, a boatload of upside, in my opinion. And, Pete DeBoer, it's just like you go to the table and you put all the pieces of the puzzle on there. And it's, this is what they were built for. This is what they've said from the beginning. We're here to win the cup. And now, knock on wood, they're almost fully healthy for the first time the entire year, where Pete DeBoer really has almost every single weapon in his arsenal. So,
and unlike some teams, they worked within the restrictions of the salary cap to do that all season, whereas other teams maybe exploited a little bit of a loophole to get to that point of the season where they're fully healthy.
Tampa.
You're talking about Tampa Bay?
Tampa.
Their current salary cap is like $92 million right now.
Yeah, I think I read that they were like 12,
like $11 million over the salary cap.
Unbelievable.
I do have, Chris. I do have a question for you. You and I have been covering this team from day one.
Yeah.
Looking at this lineup now, would Gerard Gallant be able to take this team as deep as Pete DeBoer has?
I think that's a tough question, because I think the personality of the team has changed a bit from year one to where we are now. I think Gerard Gallant was that perfect chip on your shoulder kind of guy, right? That's kind of how he played the game. And I feel like his team really kind of reflected his personality. Whereas with DeBoer, he's a real analytical guy. I feel like Gallant went a lot with his gut feeling and a lot of loyalty. Whereas Pete, I feel like analytics play a large role in what he does. And he's a very philosophical guy. Like, he fascinates me. I mean, I liked Gallant a lot. And I was really sad when they let him go, because I did enjoy being around him a lot and covering him and talking to him in those press conferences, especially when he was angry. I kind of enjoyed that too.
Like when Joe used to ask him questions and he got mad.
Just one time.
Yeah.
He said, come on, Joe, you know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I've been there too. Remember, they were -2 tonight. So that was that. But I think this team has a little bit of a different personality. I feel like they play a little more of a high, maybe not high percentage isn't the word to use, but I feel like maybe they play a little bit more of the analytics side of it. Whereas with Gallant, they were like, you know what, we're playing angry. We're going to play with the chip. And I don't know. I if those two teams played, I don't even know how you handicap it.
Right. And it's funny because if you listen to Marchessault was interviewed recently, and he was asked about the difference between the coaches, and he said that, he really liked playing for Gallant, but Gallant did play favorites. Okay.
Yeah.
Where what happened with Fleury at the bubble last year would have never happened if Gallant was the coach.
No, I think a lot of people feel that way too.
Yeah. But I will tell you this. I think DeBoer should be given credit because he lit a fire under Fleury's ass and pretty much got Fleury to focus and train this offseason. He's playing now than he's probably played better in his entire career. And it's all because of the mistreatment that he got in Edmonton last summer. And that's my opinion, but I'll stick with that one. I think that's
I don't disagree. I feel like, him coming into this season, he had something to prove. And I feel like him not playing in the bubble last year, right? And we hear how close him and Robin Lehner are, and they're friends and they get along really well and they enjoy being around each other. But at the end of the day, both of these guys want to play. It's about playing. It's about winning. And I feel like it's hard to argue that Marc-Andre Fleury is the reason that this team is here, right? Like, how do you argue against that? I feel like he's going to win the Vezina. And I feel like if they end up winning the cup,
he has to be the Conn Smythe. Has to be.
I mean, how much of a better story of that can you get, right? He's so well liked by so many people around the league. I feel like he's respected by a lot of teams and players around the league and fans around the league. Everybody likes this guy. So it would just be an incredible cap to his season if that ends up being the way it plays out.
Yeah. And so, and just touching back to your point here between Lehner and Fleury, if Vegas wins the first two games at T-Mobile on Monday and Wednesday, do we get to see Lehner play a game in this series?
Not game 3. I think it would depend on game 3, right? I think if Vegas wins 1, 2, and 3, why not play Robin Lehner in game 4, right? Give Fleury a little bit of a break. Then he's refreshed. He's good to go until the end.
Right.
If he gets that break. I mean, I'm not saying he's not now, but hypothetically, if he has to play 14 more games in such a short period, if you could get a little bit of a break in there, why not do it, right? Like, why not?
I agree. I think,
and the other thing is you have to keep Lehner somewhat fresh.
Exactly.
Because you have to keep him in, because how long was it between the time he played at the end of the regular season and game 1 of the Colorado series? Was it like
19 days or something like that?
So if you could get him in and get him some ice time, you do it.
So you don't think it's going to be game 1?
No.
No.
You don't think they're just going to serve him up?
It's not going to be game 1 or game 2. There may be game 3 in Montreal where we see Robin, and like Chris said, it will be great for his confidence, because his confidence was shaken when they pretty much threw him to the wolves in game 1 in Colorado.
And you had no choice; you had to leave him in there. Like, the whole point was you had to get Fleury rest, and you had to leave him in there to take the punishment. And I feel like people kind of shit all over him for that performance. And it's like, you know what? It's kind of unfair that people were shitting on him for that, because it's like, it was 19 days, as you guys mentioned, but they were walking into a hornet's nest. Colorado rested. You're just coming off game 7. You had to travel. I mean, not that Vegas to Colorado is that much travel, but it's travel. You disrupt your pattern. And
you know,
that team,
an emotional game 7 too.
yeah, and that team was flying, Colorado. So I don't give Leonard a hard time about that. It's like, it was just one of those situations where I don't think whoever was in net that night was going to make any difference.
Well, I want to throw a little wrench into this conversation. Couple times during the year, Fleury said that his legs were a little bit tired. He apparently said that after the Colorado series. So
I didn't hear that. He said
you didn't hear that?
No, I didn't hear him say that. I must have missed that.
Well, you can read our friend Steve Karp's column, actually,
okay.
where he mentioned it today. It doesn't matter. I was just trying to throw a wrench in there for fun. Fleury's playing tomorrow night. Everybody relax. He's going to play tomorrow night. I promise.
And I'll go out on a limb that if Vegas wins the first 2, you see Robin in game 3 in Montreal.
Okay, I think that's certainly, yeah. I mean, he'll if they win games 1 and 2, I do think at one point you're going to see Leonard in Montreal. Whether it's game 3 or 4 remains to be seen. But I mean, game 3 could be that one too, right? You're up 2-0. You got nothing to lose, and you feel like, look, if we win 1 of 2 games in Colorado, or in Montreal, we're happy coming home.
Okay, we're getting toward the end. We're being fast and efficient this time for the first time in the history of Hockey Nights in Vegas.
That's because we have the ultimate professional, Chris Chapman.
Mr.
He produces shows, Eddie.
Mr. Chapman, I would like a prediction for the series, and I would also like the MVP of the series, please.
All right. Well, I think a lot of people are kind of feeling Vegas just blows through these guys. I hear a lot of prognosticators saying Vegas in 5. I feel like that's too easy. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say Montreal is competitive in the series. I think Vegas in 6. I feel like they win it in Montreal, game 6. My MVP, I'm going to go with Jonathan Marchessault.
Joe, prediction and series MVP.
It's funny because I was also going to say Vegas in 6, and it's funny because William Karlsson was asked in the Minnesota series and in the Colorado series if Marchessault's goals were important goals, and he said, "I'll get back to you on that." Well, he's done nothing but score important goals, so I'm gonna mirror Chris and a great guy to follow. Vegas in 6 and Marchie for the MVP.
All right. Well, I'm gonna say Montreal.
Uh-oh.
Montreal wins 1 game.
Oh.
The thing that
I figured this is that when you said that, I thought this would be our last podcast.
Montreal is going to win one of either game 3 or game 4.
Okay.
At home in front of their 2,500 fans. There's just too much in my, there's too much depth. There's too much mojo going on right now. And one guy can't win a series. He just can't, even if he stands on his head. I don't think Montreal has much of a chance. Not to say that this is going to be a pushover, not to say that these games aren't going to be competitive, because I believe that they are. But at the end of the day, Vegas just has too much. So I'm going to say Vegas in 5, and I'm going to stick with Alex Pietrangelo, because you know what? I think the proverbial jockstrap is loosened a little bit. You know, he had a really rough regular season between COVID and the allegedly maybe could have possibly sort of maybe been a broken wrist kind of gizmo that cost him a dozen games. But you know what? He has found his rhythm. and he is certainly carrying the decor. Shea Theodore doesn't have a goal. Alex Martinez is their best defensive defenseman by a long shot, but I feel like this is the Alex Pietrangelo certainly that they're paying $8.8 million a year for, and I think that he's rolling right now. And we always wondered how long was it going to take him to sort of fit in. Like when Pacioretty got in, it was a difficult fit the first year. Family, kids, life, systems, everything else. It's just a different Pietrangelo. We wondered why he was sort of wandering all over the ice sometimes, but you know what? I think that he's dialed in, and I think that when they put him on PP1, they certainly haven't scored a ton, but their power play has become much more effective, and they get a lot more shots on goal with him quarterbacking the power play. And I think it's his time to continue to shine through. So I'll take the Golden Knights in 5. The gents have the Golden Knights in 6, and they both like the little ball of hate for the series MVP. And we're gonna wrap up possibly the shortest episode of Hockey Nights in Vegas in the history of our esteemed, storied podcast. We'll be back with you on Thursday after game 2 to recap round 3, the first 2 games against the Canadiens. Joe, you're pounding your pen. What do you want to say?
I want to say one thing before we leave. There's going to be a key moment in this series, and it's going to involve Nick Suzuki and Braden McNabb. Suzuki's going to be coming down the right wing, and Braden McNabb is just going to annihilate him.
So you're going to say there's going to be a death during the series?
No, not a death.
Because if he hits Suzuki along the board, he might die.
He may not get a welcome back video from the Vegas Golden Knights, but he's going to get a welcome to T-Mobile from Braden McNabb. And
tell you what,
will disappear after that hit. By the way,
Braden McNabb, I feel like is the most underrated checker and hitter, maybe in the NHL. That guy, he absolutely annihilates guys. I can't remember who it was from Colorado in Game 6, but he hit him so hard, his helmet flew off, and not just flew off, it looked like his entire head came off with the helmet. I'm sorry, Chris, the only other defenseman who used to annihilate guys is Cromwell from Detroit. And
that's it.
You did not want to go down his side of the ice.
I'll make the argument. I would rather get hit by Ryan Reeves than Braden McNabb.
Yes, I agree with you.
Like Reeves, everybody loves Reeves, right? Because of the big hits, but man, McNabb he sizes guys up and he lays the lumber.
He's a bucket popper. He pops everyone's bucket.
And the funny thing is, he's like the most mild-mannered, quiet guy, but you put him on that ice and he turns into a monster.
And I don't know, I know I watch the warm-ups quite often. He practices that move in the warm-ups where he skates back into the – you've noticed because you and I sat down in that corner and watched him go warm-ups. He practices that move every game.
Yeah, he's the one guy I would not want to come across him in open ice.
Well, I think Suzuki's gonna meet him up close in person.
All right, that's gonna do it. Chris Chapman, Fox Sports, thanks so much for spending the afternoon with us. We really appreciate it. We normally don't have a gift for anybody that joins us for the podcast, so we're going to go ahead and continue that tradition.
Hey, I'm nothing wrong with continuing tradition.
And that's going to wrap up this episode. You'll see the like and subscribe buttons flashing on during the podcast. Do us a favor and hit those, please. We're trying to grow a little audience here and bring you good content once or twice a week. Other than that, thank you very much for joining. And we really appreciate you. And we will see you Thursday after game 2 against Montreal. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
no problem,
Chris.
Guys.
Yeah.